So the topic of the Sabbath is something that has become like more prevalent in my life recently, and I've actually just taken my first Sabbath. I took it last week from when I'm recording this video. But ultimately, for me, what led me to the Sabbath is kind of just repeated conviction on it. Because as Christians, we always hear a lot about like the Sabbath. We know a lot about like the Ten Commandments, and obviously, we're not saved through our works, we're saved through faith. But obviously, I've made videos about this plenty of times. Our faith is linked with our works. If you have sincere faith, as it says in James, and also to some extent in Romans, your faith. If you have sincere faith, you'll want your works will show as fruits of that faith, right? Like you want to do, the things that God tells you to do if you're close with God. But anyways, because of like that kind of like fraction we have, as Christians, like New Testament, Old Testament, I don't have to do the Old Testament commandments because I don't need to do them to go to heaven. And understandable. Something like the Sabbath is something we quickly look over, and I think something that's very interesting that we need to understand as humans. I spoke in the last video about trusting God more than ourselves, and how His ways are so much further ahead of like our ways. They're so above our ways. As it says in the Bible, He says my ways, the Lord's ways, are not like our ways. You start learning just the wisdom. You get a glimpse of the wisdom, that God has as you journey further in your relationship with God. You start to learn just how wise God is, right? And I love seeing the world catch up to things that were taught in the Bible 2,000 years ago. Like, to stay on topic with the Sabbath, something like they've done studies that if you rest, you're more productive. If you work 6 days a week and then you rest on the seventh day, you're more productive. You'll do more in those 6 days than you will in the seven. And it's like, I wonder where I've heard that one before. Oh, right, it's in the Ten Commandments, bro, like thousands of years ago. But I love seeing the world catch up to it. But anyways, you get to see the wisdom that God has. And the thing about the Sabbath is it's something we hear as Christians, right? As I was just speaking about earlier, is that it's one of those things you're like, it'll be nice to do, but I don't have to do it, right? And that's right, you don't have to do it. But I think that's where the sanctification, the process of sanctification takes place as you get closer with God. Is that you really get to as you get closer with God, right? You give your life to Jesus, and you have that sincere faith. You start, reading in His Word and start taking heed of like what He's teaching us, and you get to see like the wisdom that God has. And the Sabbath, as much as it's something we kind of like, it'll be nice to do, but I don't really have to do it. You don't have to do it, but there's a reason why God told us to do, He commanded us to do it, in the Ten Commandments. And it's one of those things we hear about and we kind of just brush off. And you probably need to hear it a couple of times before you decide to like think about it and be like, maybe I should implement it. And that's what happened with me. I heard I was at a young adults thing, and they preached on the Sabbath, and then there was like literally like a week and a half later I was at this other young adults thing, and they're talking. We kind of spoke about the Sabbath. I have a couple of friends who do practice the Sabbath, and I'd heard about it before. And this all just happened in like a 6-week period, let's say. And I've been listening about why it's important to keep the Sabbath. And I'm kind of like, you know what? Yeah, I agree. But again, it was one of those things where it's like in through one ear. I won't say it's in through and then out the other, because I did keep it in my mind. That's what led me to actually start doing it. But like it was like in one ear, and I kind of just kept it. But I was like, okay, and then I forget about it. Right? Like that'll be cool. But I'm so busy in life, I'm not gonna really think about doing this. Like I don't have time to do it. It would be nice to keep a Sabbath, but I don't have a whole day to just give up, right? And ultimately, I think what pushed me further, there was two questions, and I'll get to them after I finish telling you the story. I was watching a video by Alan Parr, and it was quite interesting. The topic of the video was not about the Sabbath at all. It was about why Jews reject Jesus, as king. And he was speaking about an experience they had that actually led to them doing the Sabbath, right? Where they went to Israel, they visited Israel for the first time, and they landed there on like a Saturday, and it was dead. Like it was deserted. There were no cars being driven. Like there was nothing going on. It was dead. And then the tourists reminded them, they're like, oh yeah, it's the Sabbath. They take it very seriously this side. And apparently this is crazy. This is wild. And this is what just kills me, bro. But like when Jesus was saying to the Pharisees, it was like, Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. So apparently what the Jews do is that like You know when you open the fridge, like the light goes on. They can't have that. Like you can't do that. Otherwise, it's considered work. So what they do is like they will tape down like the lever that turns on that light. So like they'll still open the fridge, but now the light isn't on. And the reason they do that is because apparently one of the things you're commanded not to do is that like you can't start a fire on the Sabbath, and that light turning on is like starting a fire. And it's like, bro, like at that point, it's literally what Jesus was saying. You're getting too legalistic with it, and Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. But what Alan Paul was saying was that, okay, we're not going to take it to that extent, but we're going to start keeping the Sabbath. And for him, it was like he works an online ministry, right? His YouTube channel, and he works like 5 days a week. He has his weekend off, but they decided to do the Sabbath on a Friday, which is it takes away one of the working days as well. And he said that like God can still do like God can do more with my 4 day work week than I can do with a 5, 6, 7 day work week, right? And that was one of the things that pushed me. After I heard that on a Saturday. Literally the next Sunday, I was doing my Sabbath. I was just like, okay, I hear you, God, right? And that's it. That's the crux of it right there, right? When we're like, oh, I don't want to give up a whole day. It's like one of the things that I heard when I was at one of the young adults things when they were preaching about the Sabbath was that you got to ask yourself, who are you working so hard for? And if that answer is God, I'm working hard for God, so I can provide for my family, I want to live in God's perfect will for my life. If you're working hard for God, God commanded you, He commands you to take a rest on the seventh day, right? And again, going back to like the whole Sabbath was made for man, not man for Sabbath. It doesn't have to be like on a Saturday or on a Sunday, like whatever it is, like you can do it your way, right? And I think that's an important thing about the Sabbath, to what Jesus said about, Sabbath being made for man, is that like you can do what you want. Like there's no, oh, I can't cook today because technically that's working and I'm not taking my Sabbath. Or I can't open the fridge because then that little light is going to show and that's starting a fire. No, that's just getting ridiculous with it. Or I can't drive here because that's technically working. Like, dude, all a Sabbath is just taking a rest day to chill, like to disconnect, spend time with God, right? Don't do all the like the day-to-day tasks that you're so used to doing. And for you, if taking a Sabbath means going out with your friends and you guys just go chill and you watch a football game or something, or you go out and you like play some sports. Like some people deem playing sports working because you're physically exerting yourself, but like if you're someone like me, like dude, I love sports. Like for me, that's that's rest in my eyes. Obviously, use your own discernment. If you're someone who's training like 5-6 days a week and like Sunday you're gonna go and you play sports, you're not resting like your physical body. You probably would want to rethink that. But ultimately, it's what you want to do, right? What you want to do. And another thing that we've kind of spoken about in like the Connect groups is that it doesn't have to be a whole day. You can just start with like, oh, I'm just gonna take like the first 4 hours. I'm gonna take the first 8 hours or 12 hours of Sunday or whatever day it is to just take a Sabbath. I know there was one thing that this one guy said at the Connect groups that was like, I struggled to like completely block out a whole day. So what I do is like I'll take like my lunch break that I have, my hour lunch break that I have at work. I will spend some time in the car and I'll just chill and just spend time with God, and that's my Sabbath. Personally, I don't think that counts because I'm like, are you really like getting a day to like rest? Are you getting like a time where you're just resting away from like the day to day? But again, Sabbath made for man, not man for Sabbath. If that's what works for him, then so be it. But again, what pushed me was when Alan Paul was like, God can do more with a 4-day work week than I can do with a 7-day work week. And do you believe that? Right, tying back to what I said in my last video about do you trust God more than yourself, right? And it's something I have to be like, actually, of course I have to trust God more than myself, right? God can do more with my 6-day work week than I can do with my 7-day work week. So of course it's a no-brainer to just take rest on a Sunday, or take rest, or just block out one day where I can just take rest. And I think that's what I wanted to share about the Sabbath. And I know, just knowing how things work with the Sabbath, if you're watching this video, maybe you probably still haven't been convinced that you need like to be convinced more and more. But just something to think about. But yeah, make sure you subscribe to join the community. Until next time, see you guys.